So thank you, Sarah, and guten Tag zusammen. Schöne Grüße aus dem Silicon Valley. So, is there a next Silicon Valley? And should anyone care? I would suggest that countries and cities and regions around the world are investing in the innovation economy. And the reason for that is long-term growth. So what we'll talk about today is why an innovation economy leads to long-term growth, as well as which cities are leading the way and what it takes to be a technology hub. And in the end, we'll conclude that location really does matter. So what made Silicon Valley what it is today? I would suggest that there are 4 elements that made Silicon Valley successful. Brilliant scientists, an entrepreneurial spirit, a different mentality, and money. So brilliant scientists. Silicon Valley had Stanford University and the University of California, Berkeley. And a lot of places around the world today have wonderful research-based universities. But they also had an entrepreneurial spirit. Employees were not content working in the companies that they worked in. They wanted to create their own companies. And that's a spirit that they still have today. And they also have a different mentality. Fail fast, learn from your mistakes, and never give up. And they also have money. Last year, there was $100 billion spent on venture capital investing in the world. $100 billion. And $50 billion of that was spent in Silicon Valley. Now, I personally don't believe that the world's technology hub will move from Silicon Valley. But others may not agree with me. There are competitors to Silicon Valley today. So we asked 750 technology executives this following question, and 3/4 of them are C-suite executives. We asked this question: what is the likelihood that the technology center of the world will move from Silicon Valley to another country in the next 4 years? And for the first time in our survey, and we've been doing it for 7 years, over 50% believe that it's likely or very likely that the technology hub of the world will move from Silicon Valley in the next 4 years. Now, there's basis for that. Silicon Valley has its issues. The average median income in Silicon Valley is $120,000 per person. And you would say, well, that's pretty good. Well, it's creating an issue because the technology giants are able to afford those salaries so people can live in Silicon Valley. And as a result of that, there are less people taking chances today than have in the future. The average home price in Silicon Valley is $1.2 million, making it very difficult to own a home, making it very difficult to raise a family in Silicon Valley. And even though there was $50 billion of venture capital funding in Silicon Valley, there was very little that actually went to seed or early stage funding. Most of it went to later stage funding. Also, net foreign immigration was less than net domestic migration in the current year for the first time ever. So more people are moving out than are moving in. They also have an overmatched infrastructure, high taxes, and issues about privacy and security and diversity and inclusion and corporate cultures at some of the tech giants. But as you will see in a moment, I still believe that Silicon Valley has the necessary ingredients for success. So I mentioned our most recent survey. As you can see, it's very global, spread throughout the world, with various dimensions of the technology world. So 25% of our survey respondents were from large enterprises, 29% from the mid-market, 31% from startups, so we heard from a lot of you, and 15% from venture capital firms. You can view the entire survey on kpmg.com in the technology section of our industries tab. And I'll discuss in a few minutes where our respondents believe the technology hubs currently exist in the world. But let's go back to why an innovation economy leads to long-term growth. I mean, it makes sense, right? And that's why cities compete with each other to be a tech hub. With social and political issues grabbing the headlines, governments are still investing in their innovation economies throughout the world. So Paul Romer, Professor Paul Romer of New York University in 2018 won a Nobel Prize for his contributions to endogenous growth theory. And this has been tested and validated over the years, but his theory postulates that investments in technology innovations, the knowledge sector, and human capital drive long-term economic growth. The more people that work in the knowledge sector, the more new ideas that are generated, thereby making everyone else very productive in that production of goods and services. And a few extra points of growth each decade can be transformational for cities, regions, and countries around the world. The chart you see shows that theory in terms of output per person. And although there's an initial drop in output per person as a result of the investment in an innovation economy will outgrow on an output per person basis over a longer period of time. So the innovation economy will lead to long-term growth. I should also mention the multiplier effect. So it's not just about those working directly in innovation. There was a paper from a University of California, Berkeley professor by the name of Enrico Moretti in 2012. And he noted, and I quote, "For each new high-tech job in a city, 5 additional jobs are ultimately created outside of the high-tech sector in both skilled and unskilled workers." And the innovation economy has the largest multiplier of any other sector of the economy. So build the economic engine of an innovative economy and the jobs will come. And just as an FYI, the unemployment rate in Silicon Valley is 2.8%, which is essentially people moving between jobs. It's full employment in an innovation economy. So what do you need to do to be a tech hub? And why is Silicon Valley so successful? So I mentioned brilliant scientists, entrepreneurial spirit, a different mentality, and money. But let's break it down even more. So as you can see, an urban environment is incredibly important to an innovation economy, just like you have here in Berlin. By 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And millennials love to live in an urban environment. And you'll see in a few minutes what those technology executives in our survey, where they believed is the #1 innovation hub in the world outside of Silicon Valley. And you'll see that it has a very familiar urban center. You have to have a favorable regulatory environment. You have to have state-of-the-art infrastructure. So Seoul and Singapore and Hong Kong are typically rated as having the best metro systems in the world. You have to have a pipeline of skilled talent. You have to have availability of funding. A decade ago, there was virtually no funding in China. And now you have the successes of Alibaba and Tencent and Baidu, who are replicating the successes that they have by investing in their innovation economy. You have to have positive demographic trends. You have to have research-based institutions, which a lot of the technology hubs in the world today have. Importantly, you have to have a history of successful exits. I just mentioned what happens in China, but those exits will create wealth, and that wealth will be reinvested into an economy. So you have to have more than just companies starting. You have to have successes of those companies that fuel the next level. So founders and entrepreneurs in companies, they have choices of where they want to go. And so it's very important that these trends be in your minds as you think about where you locate your companies. So where do our survey participants think that the innovation hubs will be over the next 4 years? And we asked this question being, outside of Silicon Valley, who's leading the way? And as you can see, I mentioned earlier about the importance of an urban center. And New York is now leading the way in the perception of being an innovation hub. Some of it is due to the urban center, some of it is due to the funding that's available, some of it's due to the tech giants who have all moved into New York and are creating significant employment in New York. The others you can see on the list, Beijing, Tokyo, London, Shanghai. Year after year, those are what technology executives are telling us are where the innovation is happening. And hopefully you can see Berlin as number 11. I've had a wonderful time in Berlin. This is my first time here. What a terrific innovation ecosystem you have here. And I'm actually looking forward to next year when we do the survey that Berlin is in the top 10. Now, I'm often asked, who isn't on the list? And so one city that I have visited, which I think is absolutely terrific for innovation, is Toronto. Toronto, Canada, is the birthplace of artificial intelligence. It has the most AI startups in the world. All the tech giants are moving there for the wonderful universities and the wonderful AI-based startups that are there. So be on the lookout for great things happening in Toronto. So our survey captures the perception of senior executives and their views of the tech sector. Now, generally, one factor that can significantly impact perception is global sports. Global sporting events will provide a platform for showcasing a city or a region's technology. And the World Cup and the Olympics are great examples of that. Consider the 1964 Olympics. They were dubbed the Scientific Olympics in Tokyo because of advanced electronic timing, as well as satellite and color broadcasting. These Olympics helped launch Japan into the global leadership position in timing equipment and wristwatches and consumer appliances and electronics. The 2018 Pyeongchang Olympics in Korea ushered in 5G networking autonomous vehicles, and virtual reality. And there's already buzz occurring about the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, which are expected to feature facial recognition, drone security, and 5G high-definition streaming capabilities. So I'm curious as to where Tokyo will land on the list when we do this survey in 2021. So lastly, if you should be considering where to locate your headquarters, maybe an R&D center, a joint venture, or an acquisition, these are the questions that you should ask yourself. Talent pipeline, population trends, cultural synergies. Do startups and big cultural and corporate centers work well together? Do you have an urban area, research-based institutions, a great metro system, bandwidth? Can people work anywhere? Is the regulatory environment favorable? How about taxes, other incentives? Is it costly to be there? And lastly, and I think most importantly, is the funding available for you? So in conclusion, as I have mentioned a few times today, when you're innovating, location matters. If you truly want to put your business in the best position to be successful, you need to consider the future. Where is your funding coming from? Where is your talent coming from? And will the government help you, or will the government get in your way? I think you owe it to your great ideas and to everybody that's supporting you to put your business in the best position for success. So thank you for having me. I've had a great time here in Berlin, and I look forward to speaking to many of you later today. Auf Wiedersehen.
Let's have a couple questions. And you know, Tim, I couldn't let you go before asking you a couple of questions, actually, because you're talking about hubs. We're here at the conference, which is literally called Hub Berlin. Berlin considers itself a tech hub. It's number 11, according to your survey. What's lacking in Berlin right now?
Well, you know, I don't have a lot of evidence other than observations as well as discussions. And I think the one thing that's I wouldn't say it's missing, you just haven't had them yet, and that's a history of successful exits. So those large, successful exits of companies that create the wealth that then gets reinvested into the innovation economy, and that takes time.
So you said you're coming back next year?
If I'm invited, yes.
Okay. What do you think needs to happen now within the next year? Like, what sort of milestones would you like to see?
Well, it would be great to see some of those successful exits. It'd be great to see what the government is doing to encourage the startup environment. More conferences like this, the ability of everybody to get together and be able to do that on a routine basis. I mean, this is such a spectacular facility. I see a fair number of these conferences, and I would say that this is as great a facility as I see, and the interaction amongst the participants here is just fantastic. So I think just doing more of the same, and I think great things will happen.
What would be your recommendation to those federal ministers? Because I mean, we have a number of them actually attending this conference.
Oh wow! You know, talking to government is always very difficult, because I think they really have to balance, those social and political issues that they face with investing in the innovation economy. I don't think anybody doesn't want to invest, but I think with any, whether it's a big corporation or whether it's a political environment or a group of local politicians, you have to get beyond some of the day-to-day. And if you think long-term, because I think all the constituencies want long-term growth, I think the right answer is to invest in the innovation economy.
Tim Zanni, thank you so much. Everyone, a big round of applause for Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.